Welcome into the Pump Fake, everybody. Jarrett Bailey with you as always, joined by making his Pump Fake debut some way, somehow, the wonderful Arif Hasan from Wide Left. You can check out his Substack now, which you all should do. Fantastic stuff. Good to have you in, buddy. How are you?
I'm vibing. This music is great. Oh my gosh. No, man, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you coming on. And this season, the Minnesota Vikings have been one of the focal points of the year, and you being a big Vikings guy, especially at this time of the year as we get into the final stretch of the year, it felt good to get you on. So I'm looking forward to breaking it all down. Let's start with last night though, because it's always fun when we can talk about Bo Nix on this show, and the reason for that is because I think it was Robert Mays from The Athletic who pointed it out earlier this year, where he was like, every year there's always like one fan base who can't be normal about their quarterback, and this year it's the Denver Broncos, and that has been very much backed up because we've seen people go crazy about Bo Nix this year from the Denver side of things, so much so that if anybody is critical of Bo Nix, they'll tell Nate Tice he doesn't watch film, or they'll make fun of Bill Barnwell, just like the really smart people who know what the hell they're doing. And that's when that we've really lost the recipes in Denver, when people are like, actually Nate Tice doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
This guy goes to bed watching the film, right? He eats it for breakfast, man. It's just such a ridiculous thing that people say about these guys.
So one of my favorite things now is like whenever the Broncos are in like a standalone game or a big game, if Nix is like having one of those days, all of these smart people just kind of converge and like just post like little like subliminal screenshots or like little just like hints of like, oh, I wonder how Bo Nix is doing.
Yeah, he's crazy.
And especially last night when he was averaging like 5 feet per attempt, everybody was like, oh, would you look at that? So, last night was funny for that reason. And now the Broncos, who felt like, a team that was going to be a playoff team, they still very much can be, but now they've got to close out with a Bengals team who is incredibly hungry. And they looked at last night's results saying, all right, if we win out, we get a little bit of help. We got a shot of really like sneaking in here. And then they play a Chiefs team on in the final week of the year, where who knows what their playoff implications will be if they're still playing for the 1 seed, depending on what the result of this coming week will be. So I don't know. I don't want to say I'm rooting against Denver, but like I kind of am,
Right. I think it makes sense to like want to root for your takes to be right. I think that's fine. And then also, like, when a fan base has kind of provoked you into hating them, it's okay to embrace that. That's not on you actually anymore. That's on them. And so I think it's fine. Also, like, it's fun to like one of the things that I've learned about like covering the NFL is that it becomes like more difficult to like find stuff to cheer for, like the more you like cover the sport, because you're like you're removing yourself, you're like a little bit less like kind of invested in particular teams, so finding like reasons to like cheer for outcomes, that's fun. It can be arbitrary, who cares? It's fun.
I agree, and I found myself doing that a little bit. And I think that this comparison with Nix and these Broncos is actually pretty good. And I've seen it made by a few people, so I don't want to act like I'm like a genius here. But a lot of people have been pointing to like Mac Jones and his rookie year and that Patriots team as like similar to this Broncos team. We're like, hey, man, this could be Bo Nix's peak. Like, this is probably as good as it's going to get. And I think that's fair to point out because, I think it's a little bit different with McInway because he was looked at as like this polished product coming into the league. Oh, he does everything so well. Where Nix was kind of looked at as like, all right, this is going to be a project you maybe shouldn't take in the first round. But regardless, I think the similarities are there where, okay, like this rookie season could be like the cream of the crop for what he can do. And if I'm a team like Buffalo who could see them in the playoffs, I'm like looking across the way like, oh, Bona, okay, yeah, we'll happily take that.
Right.
Park to kick off our playoffs. That'll be a nice little tune-up game for us.
Yeah, I think so. Someone in my mentions called him Mountain Man Mac Jones, and so that's just going to be stuck in my head forever. Yeah, no, I think that that's certainly a possibility. It definitely seems like a lot more is being manufactured for Knicks than it is for other players, and sometimes we can see that in like the low depth of target, like in this game where he averaged 5 feet in attempt. Okay, I mean like 4th and 8, you're throwing like behind the line of scrimmage, like okay, but sorry, it's just like it was crazy. But obviously, like if you take a look at his like season long numbers. His depth of target is not like the lowest in the NFL or anything like that. So it's clear that like that's not kind of the whole of everything with Bo Nix, but I do think that there is a lot of kind of manufactured, trying to make sure that you don't have to do much in terms of reads because coming out of Oregon we actually had no idea how good he was because he didn't have to read defenses. Like that's just not what his job was. Making sure you minimize that aspect of his play, and he's gotten better at it for sure. But it's very clear how much depends on play design and the quality of the players relative to like other quarterbacks. Because every quarterback benefits from good play design and good teammates, but it seems like Bo Nix relies on that maybe a little bit more. We're getting a bunch of good numbers we did from weeks like 5 to 14. But yeah, it seems like it's a lot more insubstantial with him than it is with somebody like a Jaden Daniels, who also had like a little bit of a dip in the season, but already seems back. I think that his ability to manufacture his own outcomes as opposed to have them manufactured for him is kind of the difference here. And I will say this, his athleticism did surprise me, his ability to kind of use that in a meaningful way, right? So I do want to give him credit for that, but it just feels like a lot of what constitutes like creative, ingenious quarterbacking, right, is just not really there for Knicks in the same way. And so we'll see, we could be wrong, but it is tough when you've got a rookie that old where you're talking about kind of the development path for that kind of guy.
Yeah, and like I don't want this to like just be like the bang on Bo Nix hour, but and I do want to give him credit because coming out like I didn't think he was gonna be anywhere near this good even.
Right, of course.
Yeah, so credit to him for taking advantage of what's given to him. And when we say things like, the Broncos are doing a lot to help him out, that's like that shouldn't be a knock. Like that's an example of really good coaching that Sean Payton and the offensive staff are doing by, making things easier with a lot of screen passes, a lot of play action, and things of that nature. So it's not a knock on the Broncos. If anything, that's just really good coaching, making life easier for Bo Nix. But there should be this happy medium where we can say, yeah, Bo Nix is playing better than I certainly expected him to do, but we also don't have to, stand on a mountaintop and proclaim him to be the future who's going to lead Denver into prominence for years to come. And he's going to get, a $60 million contract when the time comes. I don't think that's going to happen either. So happy mediums are hard to find, especially when you're dealing with passionate fan bases who want to, shove things in the faces of people. But yeah, so I'm going to try my best to give Bo Nix credit there for playing better than I expected him to, because he certainly exceeded my very low expectations. But at the same time, games like last night when you have a 2-score lead and then like there's like a minute and a half left, it's 3rd and 11, you're throwing 1-yard passes to the flat. Like, what are we doing? Like, come on now.
Man,
so little stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, but it's like those situations like that. I followed Kirk Cousins for a while, right? It's those situations like kind of late in games, 2-minute. You can't really stick to the script that you've been learning for 90% of the game. You have to be a little bit more creative. You have to be a little bit more aware. And that's where I think a lot of these quarterbacks kind of fall apart a little bit. Kirk Cousins did overcome it for about 2 years, so props to him. But it took until like 34 until he did it, right? Whereas Russell Wilson did it right away, right? And there's just like a huge difference with those kinds of quarterbacks when you're productive in some ways, but you can't really create or be kind of contextually aware as a quarterback. That's just really, really going to limit you. And again, quarterbacks can get out of that. Jared Goff got out of that. But it is really, really, I think, difficult, and most quarterbacks don't, and it kind of puts a cap on what the team can accomplish.
And I think that for a guy like that, he's like one of those classic like high floor, low ceiling guys where I think like his ceiling's probably going to be that tier of like Tua, Purdy, if you want to throw like Geno in there maybe too, like that tier of guys where it's like, sure, they're like starters in the NFL, but like there's certainly, it's better to let the teammates cook rather than try to let him cook. And he's much better when I think that's just kind of what his ceiling would be at this point. Let's talk about your Vikings though. How confident are you in Sam Darnold at this point? We're through almost an entire season. He's played really well. Kevin O'Connell's done an incredible job. Where do you put the Vikings in terms of Super Bowl contenders? Are they, in that top tier? Are they maybe just, a tier below? What do you think the ceiling for this team is?
Yeah, well, I think the Vikings are overperforming their record, but I can't think of another team in the NFL that isn't overperforming their record. That's playing really well, right? Like all of these 11 plus win teams, I feel like are overperforming. Someone has to, right? That's just the nature of variance. That some people overperform the record, but or rather, the record is over. You know what I mean? Is that the record is exceeding kind of the level of play? That's fine, right? I think that it's good to kind of set yourself up in a position to win. But it does make it kind of curious, right? The Vikings are in a position where they could potentially be a 14-win fifth seed, which is just kind of like a crazy,
pretty insane, isn't it?
But I think that they're probably like in the second tier of Super Bowl contenders, right? I wouldn't put them up there with, how well Buffalo is playing. I wouldn't put them up there with how well Detroit is playing. But there's not a ton of teams I'd put in that tier above. It doesn't seem like there are any great teams this year. It seems like there's a bunch of good teams, right? And I think the Vikings are a good team. So I'd probably rank them. I don't know. I don't have like the list in front of me in my head, but I'd rank them probably like 5th or 6th or 7th in terms of like likelihood of winning a Super Bowl, right? And if they get that first seed, that jumps up to like 3rd or something like that because you get a free game. But no, they're a good team. Sam Darnold, I think. He's probably not going to get better, which is fine because he's playing really outstanding football right now. I think that we're at a spot where it's like, hey, he's a really high volatility quarterback. We talked about creativity for quarterbacks. He's very creative. He'll just do stupid stuff a lot, which is fine, right? But like the Vikings are also leading the league in explosive play rate by like an insane margin too. Like 19% of their plays are explosive.
Crazy.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to throw a few picks along the way to get there, right? So long as you're not like Jameising, I think you're probably actually in a good spot if you do that.
Never want to go full Jameis.
Yeah, never want to go full Jameis. But yeah, like I like that the way O'Connell has embraced Sam Darnold is basically said, hey, these are the things you're good at. We're going to focus on those things, make sure that we maximize kind of the things that you're good at. Some of the stuff that you might not be good at, we're going to put into the playbook at a minimal amount, just enough to get by if we ever need to get around to this kind of stuff. But, I think that, maximizing his strengths, minimizing his weaknesses, obviously putting him in an environment where he's got, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. And I think this is really cool. Like when he does one of those stupid things, right? When he's like scrambling around in the pocket and he throws it backwards and you're like, man, I don't know about that. When he does it, he walks off the field. Kevin O'Connell like walks up to him and he's like, don't change a thing. I think that's so cool, man. I think that's so cool. Like, because like there's a lot of coaches that are probably good coaches. They'll be like, hey, this is what you did in this interception. We can avoid this. But you don't want to like overburden someone, with information, right? Like
you don't want to go full Brian Callahan to Will Levis where you're running on the field. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
yeah.
Calm down.
Yeah, like certainly you definitely don't want to like yell, like take their heads off, but you also like don't want to be like, okay, we got to modify this. We got to do it. It's like, no, man, I trust you. And you're playing the style of football I want you to play. That's going to happen sometimes. You're going to make up for it later. And just like putting that in them. And I think that like means a lot, like just from making sure you don't have to like change this offense that's working really well for you, but B, making sure that the player remains confident in their eyes, which is a really tough thing to do. So I like Sam Darnold a lot. I think Kevin O'Connell obviously is kind of the key to this drive right now. But man, it's fun to watch Darnold play. He's not like a top 5 quarterback or anything like that, but he's playing like a top 8, and yeah, it's hard for me to complain.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, like as a Steelers fan, where like when they made the moves for Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, I was like, all right, well, I mean, by default they'll be better just because like Kenny Pickett was the quarterback. So I didn't expect Russ to play like as well as he has at times this year, so it's just been kind of a pleasant surprise in that aspect too. I think, and you can maybe weigh in on this comparison, but to me, like they've just been like similar to like what Flacco and the Browns had at the tail end of last year, to like an overwhelming extreme where it's like, all right, this journeyman guy, he'll be able to give us explosive plays and we can lean back on a defense that's really good if something does go awry. I think that embracing like Sam Darnold doing crazy shit mode has been very fun to see this year, and it's led to a lot of explosive plays, We've seen Jordan Addison really emerge, like not just as like a really good number 2, but like a legit number 1 at times when Justin Jefferson was just taken off the field by the opposing defense. Addison's like, all right, I got Jordan Addison. I've got who else is in that? Jalen Monroe or Jalen Milroe. Like there's just so many different. Yeah. He's gotten so many like different not household name guys involved as well in the offense. And it's been really cool to see how he's done. Do you think that wherever he does end up next year, well, do you think he comes back to Minnesota? Because I think that ship's kind of sailed personally. I know our mutual buddy Thor Nystrom would burn down Minnesota if JJ McCarthy's not playing next year.
Right. Yeah.
But do you think that this is like a situation where he has to go to a scheme similar to this in Minnesota to continue succeeding?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, right? Being able to do all of this, obviously, with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison helps. You mentioned Jalen Nailor.
Jalen Nailor, yes, my apologies.
Yeah, no worries. The Alabama quarterback, like, hey, he wouldn't be a bad receiver, I guess. But, that TJ Hawkinson having, like small additions like Josh Oliver in the passing game, Brad Powell in the passing game, like all that kind of stuff, right? That's nice. It's a really good supporting cast, one of the better supporting casts. I think it would be really difficult for him to succeed without at least an above average supporting cast right now, because I think that when you play that style of football where you're waiting in the pocket, you're trying to wait for that explosive play to break open, you need receivers to kind of pay your trust back. And we're seeing that, like, you're a Steelers fan, you see that with like George Pickett's, Russell Wilson. Like sometimes it's like, wait a second, man, he'll get open, right? Like
that's been their offense this year when he's healthy. Just like, fuck it, George will catch this probably.
Right? Yeah. Like you can't do that with a ton of receiving cores where you're like, well, wait a second, you'll get open, because maybe you have to wait 1.5 seconds. Well, now you're on the ground, right? Like it's a pretty delicate balance. So I don't know that there's a lot of situations where he'll do that. I think that, again, the Kevin O'Connell connection is like really important, both in terms of play design and just in terms of like pure coaching. But I want to say, like, people underrated the way that he played his final 6 games at Carolina. They underrated the way that, like 50 some dropbacks in San Francisco. They look good, right? Like there is stuff there. That's why the Vikings were interested. I think the Vikings are maximizing him. I think that you're right that he's probably not going to stay in Minnesota. Like, if they win the Super Bowl, the Vikings are just going to be like, yeah, well, here's an extension. I don't care. Yeah. None of us would care, right? We'd just be like, yeah, he's earned it. Fine. Who cares? Cripple the franchise. I'm good, right? Yeah, but like Rams fans don't regret the Stafford trade, right? It's just, we're good, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's probably kind of where you're at, where he's probably leaving. But you probably want him in an offense. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a McVay style, Shanahan style offense. I think that's what a lot of people are thinking. I think it has to be an offense that's comfortable taking risks. I think that that's like the primary thing that can occur in an Earhart-Perkins system or a Coryell system or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. But it has to be an offense that allows the quarterback to kind of modulate their own risk as opposed to take risk completely out of the quarterback's. We were just talking about the Denver offense, taking risk completely out of the quarterback's hands, right? I don't think that would be an area where Darnold would succeed. So you probably want that. And you probably also want a better offensive line than the one Minnesota has right now, given the multiple injuries. Like the Christian Darrisaw injury, they benched Ed Ingram for Dalton Reisner, and there's a communication problem now. Like it is an issue, right? But I think that primarily you want an offense where you're like, hey, you can wait 3 seconds in the pocket and just rip it. And you need a receiving core and an offensive coordinator and an offensive line that's going to do all those things. Not every quarterback's going to succeed in that environment. Not every environment has that available to a quarterback. So you got to find, maybe the right fit.
I feel like we're very close to 2025 Cleveland Browns quarterback Sam Darnold happening. I think that's kind of where I'm penciling him in at right now.
Good, Jameis. Yeah, I see. Yeah. And like you really take advantage of what Tillman can do. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy, Njoku hopefully will continue kind of his high level play. Like there's pieces there. That offensive line has seen better days, but it's not awful or anything like that. Yeah, I see it. And what's really great, I assume Stefanski's going to stay. What's really great, like it'd be weird for me if they fired him, but right. Stefanski's done a really good job of changing what that offense is based on the quarterback that he has, right? The Baker Mayfield one was way more play action dependent, a little bit more risk averse. Baker's not risk averse, but the offense was a little bit more risk averse, right? Deshaun, when you thought you knew what you had in him, right? Like you kind of sent people deep before you realized that wasn't working. And then when Joe Flacco was in there, you're like, oh yeah, we're sending people deep. When Jacoby Brissett's in there, you're like, I don't know, man, we're gonna run a couple of slants here and there. Like the offense changes based on the quarterback. That's not like a bad situation, I think, for him to be in. I mean, it's bad to just generally be a quarterback for the Browns, but I think when we remove that from the equation, that situation is not an awful one.
Yeah, it could end up on somewhere on like the Jeff Garcia signing to the whatever Joe Flacco ended up being last year, somewhere on that scale. If you get closer to a Joe Flacco season to a Jeff Garcia season, you're living well. All right, let's talk about some games this weekend. That darn Patrick Mahomes just faking injuries, practicing. What a little.
Yeah, I saw that go viral the other night. It was like, oh, come on, relax. People get so mad, man.
They do. And look, I think we can acknowledge a little bit, like Patrick Mahomes. Like growing up a Steelers fan, like Patrick Mahomes went to like the Big Ben School of melodramatics. Like,
right.
I think he's legitimately hurt, but maybe a few of those limps were a little bit, actricized there just to kind of add some dramatic effect. I've seen Ben Roethlisberger do that plenty of times, but now the Chiefs, they're in a spot where, if they don't win this week, then all right, they're only a game ahead of Buffalo. And if you tie with the Bills in terms of record, obviously the Bills get the 1 seed. So they still have something to play for here. But Houston, man, like they have been such an odd team this year where the offensive line has just been a complete disaster, which I don't think anybody saw being an issue coming into this year. And they've dealt with, certain injuries, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where Collins has been gone, came back, then Diggs gets hurt. Tank Dell hasn't been as productive. What do you make of Houston? And they're 3.5-point dogs here against a Chiefs team that seems to always play one-score games. So I get that. But I don't know, man. Houston feels like one of those teams like, yeah, they're going to, host a playoff game. I don't think they're going to win one, though.
Yeah, if you gave me kind of like if I was just looking at these rosters and I was only looking at the performances that we got this year, so we're not going to get like 2018 Patrick Mahomes, right? If I'm looking at these rosters, I probably say Houston's better, right? Yeah. Like they're 3.5-point dogs, and I get it, right? It's like the Chiefs, Mahomes, right? Houston's been playing kind of up and down, but I think they're kind of hitting their stride. Like I think one thing about Houston that a lot of people kind of acknowledge but don't like incorporate into the way they talk about the team is how good that defense is. It's a really, really good defense. It's not the Chargers defense, it's not the Vikings defense, but it's a good defense, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's like kind of helped propel them. It's not just like Derek Stingley grabbing these incredible which like, man, in another world, that guy could have been a receiver, right?
He's incredible.
Ball skills, right? But it's not just that. Like they've got like a pretty good foundational setup for making sure that defense is consistent, that it works down to down. It's not just like a big takeaway, or it's not just reliant on one player. And so I think that's going to be a big part of this game. I am just concerned because you've got Chris Jones, you've got Karlaftis. I'm not a huge Karlaftis guy, but you've got an effective pass rush that has like powerful players, and you've got this offensive line that is like essentially paper mache, right? Like it is a disaster. It's a war crime almost. If Houston ever like resolves that offensive line, they're a juggernaut to me, right? Like it's like every team has a weakness, but this is like a gaping hole of a weakness. Right. It's inhibiting the rest of the offense. I trust Tank Dell to kind of get closer back. I think that they were trying to experiment with a bunch of ways to use him, especially while Nico Collins was hurt. I think they know how they want to use him, right? And so I think that we're going to get back to that. And we're probably going to get a little bit more in terms of production out of him. Nico Collins is like kind of like the Houston defense. It's like an unacknowledged elite receiver, right? Like I'm
trying to think of like the perfect comp for Nico Collins. I think he made like a Musa Muhammad from back in the day.
Man, I like that. That's or like the year that TJ Houshmandzadeh had.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Yeah. But like the Nico Collins is just like good. He's like good.
He's awesome,
right?
Yeah.
Like there's like had he had a healthy year, we'd be talking about him as a potential All-Pro, right? Because he was like leading the league in yards per game, totally, a product of his capability and capacity as a receiver. Like he's good. So I think we're just going to get that back. Against the Chiefs, it's always tough for me to pick against the Chiefs. I think probably because I don't really know how they'll handle Kelsey. And again, I like that defense a lot. I'm taking the under. I think that's my only take on this game.
Yeah. 41.5 is the over/under for this. I will happily just hit the under.
Yeah. But I'll probably just, relive my fears of Death Star Mahomes and just say I'll take the Chiefs and kind of cowered out of real analysis there.
Yeah, I made this comp earlier in the year, and you can tell me how you feel about it. But I said that the Chiefs are like Walker, Texas Ranger, where it's just like, all right, I've seen this episode plenty of times before, and it's not like young; it's like 2000s Walker, Texas Ranger. It's like, all right, Chuck's a little bit older, but we know how this is
moving a little bit slower.
Yeah, he's moving a little bit slower, but you know how it's gonna go. He's gonna get the bad guy. He's gonna kick him in the face, and he's gonna win. It's just boring at this point. I think that's what they've become at this point. Is they're just 2001 Walker, Texas Ranger. This is kind of
there's not really another Patrick Mahomes is the only quarterback in NFL history to have at least 20 comeback opportunities and have a over 50% win rate in comeback scenarios. You just have to accept it at some point. Okay, all right.
All right, we'll go to the next Saturday game. By the way, the utter woke nonsense of the Steelers and Ravens playing on Fox. What are we doing? We really just lost
our way.
Lost our way.
Country.
This is so dumb. We used to be a proper country where AFC games would be played on CBS and NFC games played on Fox, as the Lord intended. Yeah. And I'm watching Steelers Ravens on a Saturday on Fox. You know what? Maybe Thanos had a point. That's my opinion. I'm gonna just go Steelers plus 6.5 and take the under 44.5. Parlay that together. Lamar Jackson has won one game against the Steelers in his career, and it came back in 2019 against the combination of Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. Steelers have won 9 of the last 10 in this rivalry. And the game that they won was Snoop Huntley and Anthony Brown at quarterback against Mitch Trubisky in 2022. That feels like a fever dream that didn't happen, but it certainly did.
It's not real, dude. What?
Yeah, dude. 2022 was a hellacious year as a Steelers fan because, like I said, I had to live through 2 years of Pitt and Steelers fans tell me that Kenny Pickett was the gift to earth, and I was very happy once they made the decision to move on.
As an aside, I was bagging on Kenny Pickett, and someone pulled up an old tweet of mine where I was like, I'm gonna love this guy forever because of the fake slide. And I was like, are you who cares? Are you kidding me, man? No. He's not good at football.
I'll always love Dree Archer because he was fast as shit, but he wasn't good.
Right? Yeah, it's just such a weird way for people to approach this sort of thing. Yeah, dude, that ruled. I don't know what you want me to say about that. Anyway, the problem is I understand Lamar has had a fair amount of difficulty against the Steelers. This is the best Lamar has ever played in his life. He's playing just insane, incredible, outstanding football. And it's funny because I'll point this out, and some fan base gets mad for however they want to interpret what I mean by that. I was like, hey, he probably shouldn't have won the MVP last year. He probably should win it this year, kind of thing. And then they get mad because I discounted his MVP season last year, and I'm like, well, and then Josh Allen fans get mad because it's well, now you're going to take away Josh Allen's MVP. He's well, I thought he should have won it last year, even though he threw 15 picks. I don't know, man. What do you want? I don't know. It's these conversations are always annoying and difficult, but Lamar is playing just incredible football. I know the Steelers present a significant problem for him, and they do pretty consistently every time. But I feel like I gotta take them. It's just the Ravens are the defense is not what it was, but the Ravens have a powerful offense. Not as good as it was at the beginning of the season, but a really, really powerful offense. And I think that's going to be enough because to me, the Steelers, obviously Russell Wilson is playing a lot better than I expected. We just talked about that, but it feels like they're always or I shouldn't say always, for the past couple of years, have just been held together by really expertly crafted gum and duct tape, right? Just strung together teams that just manage these 500. And it's you're an expert at working with duct tape and gum. That's incredible that you did this, but this ship is going to sink, right? Yeah. And so that's kind of where I'm at with the Steelers. Again, it's a better team than it was over the past 2 years, but it feels like a team that isn't complete enough to fully challenge an AFC favorite.
Yeah, I don't think that they're Super Bowl contenders. I would probably put them in that second tier of Super Bowl teams as well, where it's just like, as a Steelers fan, like I came into the year saying, all right, they're going to be better by default. I think that they'll win 11 games. They won 10 a year prior with you and I playing quarterback. So, it just felt like they would at least improve upon that. I think they'll win a playoff game, especially if they win the division, because they'll face, either Denver again, who they've beaten. The Chargers are much more of a difficult task to beat this time around because I think they've gotten much better than they were in, week 3. So it will be, a more difficult task, but I do think that they can win a playoff game, which if they do that, I mean, I'm happy as a clam because they haven't won a playoff game since the 2016 season. So lock it up. I'm totally okay with that. So, yeah, in terms of this, like Pickens isn't playing again on Saturday. TJ Watt is, which is obviously, a big difference maker. But, it's much different when you're throwing, 50-50 balls to George Pickens than when you're doing it to, Scotty Miller and Ben Skoranek, #exciting whites. So
Scotty doesn't know.
Scotty Scotty! Put it down a notch. Oh, that was great. So that's kind of my big apropos with the offense right now is that Pickens isn't going to be out there. They seem they traded for Mike Williams for basically nothing at this point because apparently it takes him 2 months to quote unquote learn the offense. Like, dude, it's Mike Williams. He's going to run a 9. That's what
just give him a 9 ball. Yeah.
That's all you got to do. So hopefully we see a little bit more of that. Even if the Ravens do win, like, it's not going to shock me, obviously, just because of the deficits that the Steelers have on offense. And eventually I feel like the Ravens are going to break that whole shtick where it's like, oh, man, we can't beat the Steelers. Eventually they're going to. Regardless, though, I think the Steelers cover. I think 6.5 is a hilariously big spread for a game like this. That's always a rock fight and ends with a stupid score like 18-15. So I think that it'll be in the range of that. So I already bet cover and the under. What is it right now on FanDuel? I'll have to go back and look. But yeah, do that if you want free money. I feel like that's a good little lock of the week. NFC West, Rams traveling to the Jets. I think they're gonna win that game. I think bigger picture here in the NFC West is are the Rams going to hold on to the NFC West lead and get to the playoffs? I picked them to win the division coming into the year, or is a team like Arizona going to get its stuff together, Seattle pull together to get the division lead back? How do you feel about the NFC West right now?
I think it's probably the Rams to lose. I think that they've got, hold on the division. The Cardinals are fine. They're just really inconsistent. Obviously, Gannon is doing a much better job coaching than I think any of us had a right to expect. Right. But he is like quite talented at really extracting a lot out of that team. The defensive coordinator is like a fun, risky guy. I love that kind of defense. But I think with the Rams, it's just like they understand kind of who they are and how they need to win. Sometimes they don't always accomplish that goal. But, after kind of refreshing everybody on defense and just bringing in, like, I don't know if you remember this, but like last year, I think it was last year, the Rams had like 40 rookies on their 90-man roster.
I came into the year being like, all right, name 3 Rams defenders, not name Aaron Donald. Good luck. Because like you probably can't do it.
Yeah. And a lot of those guys have like turned over, right? They've turned into like pretty good players, right? Some of them are like, what's his name? Kobe Turner, the guy who almost should have won the defensive player of the year as a rookie, or defensive rookie of the year, sorry. But then you've got like Jarrett Verse, and I don't know. It's like a good group. It's not outstanding. It's not complete yet. They need to do more in the back end. But I just think that, like, generally speaking, the Rams have a really good understanding of how they need to win, and they accomplish that. Whether Puka Nacua is hurt or healthy, whether Cooper Kupp is hurt or healthy, right? Whether DeMarcus Williams gets a crazy number of touchdowns relative to his time on the field, right? I was kind of surprised. Like the last time I checked this line, it was -3 for the Rams. That was weird to me. Yes. Yeah, so I would probably take that. I would like, to me, this is like a -5 kind of matchup. The Jets are too inconsistent. I mean, we know everything we need to know about the Jets. They tell us every day. But it's just like ownership turmoil is like a crazy thing to deal with. And so like that on top of Aaron Rodgers kind of more likely to throw fuel on a fire than cap a fire. Garrett Wilson being kind of up and down in terms of his production because there's just some weeks where Rodgers doesn't want to turn to him. I don't know. I'm going to take the Rams here because they're just more stable, right? They have a good understanding of what they need to do in order to win, and they're not reliant on like one or two players on defense just kind of blowing everything up. Like the lack of a Jets pass rush has, I think, really doomed them for like the balance of the season.
Yeah, I think we saw a little bit of this from the Rams last year, where once they got healthy in the last like 6 weeks of the season, they were one of the most efficient and dangerous teams in football, and it got them into the playoffs. We're seeing a little bit of that now because obviously Puka missed a lot of time in the first half of the season and has come back. He's got 7 or more catches in 4 of his last 6 games or something crazy like that, where and you're right, they do recognize what they are. And it's like throw the ball to 17 and good things usually happen. And so far that has been a winning formula. Obviously, Kyren Williams is continuing the season that he had last year. It has been a really big focal point for them. Yeah, like last week for the Jets was hilarious because they just looked like the Packers from 2019, where it's just, all right, Aaron Rodgers is going to throw to Devontae Adams and good things are going to continue happening. But I don't foresee that being something that all of a sudden like is consistent for the final month of the year, especially with just all the stuff that they've got going on at the moment. So, yeah, I will also happily take the Rams here. Is there any other like ginormous games? I don't know. Michael Penix is making his debut against the Giants. If anybody watches that game, they should be federally prosecuted, I think. I'm not watching Drew Lock against Michael Penix, respectfully speaking.
I feel like for the rookie quarterback takes, I'm going to have to at some point, but I'll gladly take jail time because my job shouldn't exist. But no, I don't have a ton of takes on that game. I suspect Penix will be better than Kirk, mostly because when you bench a quarterback, you're benching a guy at their worst. Kirk is probably a better quarterback than he was when he was benched, which he clearly reminded us, which is a kind of a wild thing. I didn't forget how to play quarter. Like, all right, dude. But like, Penix is a very unusual quarterback to evaluate. You remember his like rookie evaluation. His athleticism, I think, came as a surprise to everyone, mostly because he didn't use it ever. Mm-hmm. And his throwing motion is just so weird and broken, but he's got this incredible arm, and so you don't know if at an NFL level he'll be accurate enough for all of these traits to come together and produce an offense. Whether he'll process quickly enough outside of that kind of, I'm not going to say boutique offense, but outside of that particular offense. It's always like this with rookies. It's difficult to tell, but I just feel like when you're in a situation where when you draft a guy, you're not ready for the guy to start, and then the guy has to start out of circumstance, it's probably not good. It's great that it's the Giants that you're doing it against. Like all you really have to worry about is Brian Burns. And then after that, you're just like, find Deonte Banks and light him up. Like that's it. That's your job. It's probably good, but yeah, I'm not gonna enjoy watching it, I guess is where I'm gonna end up. But yeah, this is a boring game. Is it Atlanta -4?
No, it's Atlanta -8.5.
Giants are down bad, man.
That's how bad it is in New York. Where, by the way, can you imagine being Brian Burns getting traded from the Panthers to the Giants? Like, bro, that's rough.
Yeah. There is a better world out there. You may not have seen it, but I promise there is a better world out there.
Yeah, bro, that's like going from lethal injection to the chair. Like there's nothing much is changing there. So yeah, like I think that Atlanta will win just because they've got more talent, and the Giants are just a tire fire. I can't imagine anybody like more than likely they're going to be looking for a new head coach. I don't think Dable's going to survive this. I think he'll go be a coordinator somewhere. But who's going to be lining up to take the Giants job?
Man, that's interesting. So like when you take a look at all of the guys that could go, it's like Ben Johnson's super picky. He's probably not going to go to the Giants, right? Yeah. No, as this is right. Brian Flores is probably not going to be hired, period. But also, like, I wouldn't pick the Giants. You're probably going to get kind of one of these head coaching candidates that's going to be, someone's third or fourth, fifth kind of guy. And when you're taking a look at kind of coaching candidates around the league, it's kind of hard to identify now what the fourth, fifth kind of guy will be, right? Is it going to be another McVay disciple? I kind of doubt it. Bobby Sloak's kind of lost his shine, right? Which I don't know, maybe he got it back. But yeah, that's a pretty difficult one to kind of figure out. Maybe, I mean, it could be, no, you don't want that. I was just thinking like, maybe, people are impressed with Mike Darnold, so they'll grab this defensive coordinator, but the defense isn't good. So
yeah, defense has been kind of a mess.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I think we'll probably find some like dark horse candidates, maybe a quarterback coach somewhere that we're not paying attention to right now that'll maybe want to cut his teeth in New York. But
I feel like maybe Liam Cohen, if they offer him enough, like that could be the one where it's just like similar to what Carolina did this past offseason, where it's kind of a shocking hire.
Yeah. It'd be kind of fun, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Let's get this done.
Tucking in Liam Cohen to the Giants. Yeah. That's what we want to do. Yeah. I think that the worst thing you could be in is like a David Culley situation from a few years ago in Houston, where it's just like, all right, he's clearly just going to be a stopgap, and we're gonna. I mean, obviously, the situation in Houston was far, much more of a bigger black cloud for different reasons than what the Giants are in right now. But yeah, it's hard to see any of the top candidates like wanting the Giants job right now for a lot of reasons. Eagles and Commanders, that'd be a good one. It's taking place in Washington. The Commanders at least always seem to play the Eagles really well, even if they don't win. Like even like Heineke ended their undefeated season a couple years ago. Sam Howell gave them hell in Washington last year. So like this is always a game, specifically like in Washington, that always seems to come down to the wire. If the Eagles win, they clinch the NFC East, I believe. I don't think they've done that yet. So yeah, big game for NFC East and playoff standings, especially for the Commanders, who are holding on to that 7 seed. In an NFC that's deeper than I think a lot of us expected to be.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because like it feels like all we get out of the Eagles are these storylines about how they don't like each other.
Yeah,
but they're on pace for like a 2nd seed. It's just like such a weird situation for them. They're another team where it does feel like sorry, gotta take this off. It's like heating up over here.
There you go.
They're like, yeah, just give your kids guys a show. But it feels like there's something insubstantial about the Eagles in the same way I was talking about like with the Steelers, where it feels like something's gonna fall out. The biggest concern I have for the Eagles is how Jalen Hurts handles blitzes and pressure. It just feels like that's been a concern, and as time has gone on, defensive coordinators have ramped up like their blitz rates against him specifically because of this. And when you have like a known weakness like that, it's just tough for you to go up against a team that is shockingly as incredible as the Commanders have been once they kind of dug themselves out of the injury hole that they had with Jaden Daniels. So I would probably take the Commanders here. I understand that the Eagles have like a lot going for them. Seeing Jalen Carter kind of like reemerge as like a really strong figure for them, seeing, like some of these old head pass rushers continue to play well. Yeah, I like it, but it feels like there's something that's going to fall out for them, that they're kind of on the precipice. And I think the Commanders are in a good spot to kind of take it from them.
Yeah, something about them just always feels like unbuttoned and like disorganized. I think a lot of that stems from just like the Sirianni stench, and fair or not, I mean that's just kind of the aura that comes with him. It's just like, all right, this dude just seems a little bit unhinged at times. Did you see against the Steelers, like he was gonna like go talk to Jalen Carter, and the defensive line coach like blocked him from doing it, and then he and the defensive line coach got into an argument. It's like, bro, how are they winning games right now?
They have like the worst vibes. I swear to God,
unbelievable how like, all of them hate each other, and I think they're just taking all of that hate out on the opponent, and it's working. Maybe that's what it is.
I've been in situations where like competitive situations where like I've hated my teammates or my partners, and we've just aimed that outwards, and it's been effective. But man, at some point that ship falls out of the sky, right? Like at some point it's just over.
Overall, do you think there's going to be much movement in terms of playoff seedings in either conference? I think the AFC is much more locked in than the NFC is right now. But I think that there is a world where Cincinnati does take over the 7 seed, especially if they win this weekend. Then it's going to come down to, if the Chiefs beat the Broncos, which could absolutely happen, and as long as the Colts and Dolphins lose at least one game, then, look, Cincinnati's right there for the taking for the 7 seed. I do think that the NFC playoff picture is much more up in the air, especially the wild card situation where you've got Washington holding onto a spot. That the Seahawks are like the first team out right now, and they've got 8 wins. We could see a lot of movement in that conference more so than the AFC, especially now with the Lions having 2 losses, as well as the Eagles. We could see maybe the 1 seeds, which is a lot of different things that could happen in the NFC.
Yeah, no, you're right. The AFC seems like a little bit more kind of set in stone. I think we've got more clinched too. Like I think that just kind of makes it so. But yeah, like the Ravens and the Chargers are basically the Broncos are probably going to be there. But yeah, I think it's like the Bengals are probably in one of the better spots to take that from the Broncos. You mentioned kind of what scenario that is. Weirdly, you take a look at the records and kind of the upcoming opponents. The Colts, they've got a shot, which I hate.
I just don't believe in the Colts, man. Like it's just too inconsistent of a team. Like, by the way, I do love I'm not gonna pretend I watch a ton of like saved or like snaps every week of the Colts. Like I'm not like tuned into like having them as a TV game. But it is very fun to me. Like when I'm watching and I see scrolling along the tickers, like, oh, Anthony Richardson's 9 of 30 for 300 yards. That's pretty cool. Like, I don't know how that happened.
It's nuts. like NFL blitz stat lines, right? Like not even Madden, just like NFL blitz. Yeah, it's crazy. It's certainly like a fun style of football to think about. It seems like talking to Colts fans, it's actually excruciating to watch.
Oh, I bet it is.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is possible for the Colts to do that. It is. I think really, honestly, we're talking about the Bengals. But I think at the NFC, like obviously, we just talked about how like the top seed could shake up if the Vikings win out and the Eagles win out, depending on how like 30 other games go, like genuinely, right. Like, you know. Then one of them takes the 1 seed and that moves the Lions down to the 5th seed, which is also like an insane 5th seed situation.
That is crazy.
And like it seems like the Packers have basically sewn up one of the other wild card spots. So after that, like it's pretty difficult to figure it out. I'm guessing we're going to get the Buccaneers, especially because they've got a couple of easier games coming up. We're probably going to get the Buccaneers at one of those top seeds. We mentioned the Rams. I think the Rams are probably going to end up being the 4th seed because the NFC West just kept beating each other up and losing a couple of games that they shouldn't have lost. And then the Packers are obviously like the other wild card, like I mentioned. So it's really just like who I think the 7th seed is. Yeah, so I think the 7th seed probably belongs to Washington. It's tough for me to envision how any of those, those teams in the hunt, right? The Seahawks, Falcons, Cardinals, the birds.
All the birds.
All the birds. Yeah, the Eagles, I guess, the other one. So the Washington's competing with all of the birds, right? Because if Washington wins out and the Eagles lose out, I think Washington gets it. I think that I haven't done enough playoff machine stuff for the NFC,
right.
But that's a possibility, in which case that would be very funny. So I'm cheering for that. But yeah, it's tough for me to envision that the 7th seed gets out of those two teams, right? Because the Seahawks, I think the offensive line issues are just too catastrophic. The Falcons, we don't know what's going on at quarterback, and by that I mean we know who the quarterback is, but we don't know who the quarterback is, right?
Right.
And then the Cardinals, again, just like they shot themselves in the foot too many times this season, I think, for them to kind of climb back up and get there. They've got they've got Carolina coming up next, so that's nice. But like Carolina is also better than we thought. Now that Bryce Young has kind of like went on his like self-discovery journey or whatever.
Yeah,
like
he went on his
puberty, right?
Ring and himself. Yeah, good for him.
Yeah. No, I mean like his voice has gotten deeper. He's growing like hair. It's very.
He's gone through NFL puberty. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. It's very like changes, right? Like what? But yeah, the Panthers seem a little bit more invigorated, but I still think the Cardinals probably have that game. But it's just like I don't think it's enough, right? I think like too many other things have to go right for the Cardinals. So to me, it's mostly just the Seahawks and the Falcons who just have these catastrophic like question marks. It's probably just going to be the Commanders in the 7th seed or the 2 seed, one of the two, right? And then the Packers and then the Vikings.
My favorite thing is like when you see like all these playoff machine things, like, all right, if 90 of these things happen, then the Commanders will be the 1 seed, and somehow the Eagles will miss the playoffs. I was like, all right, dude. Like,
okay, relax. Yeah. If they win by exactly 13 points in week 18, they're like, oh, yeah, no, go on. Yeah, I'm curious.
Actually, this is exciting. I do want to know what this could look like. Do tell me how somehow the mathematically eliminated Giants can get the 7th. I actually do like what this
according to the Constitution, the Giants can still win. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Arif Hasan, what have you got coming over on the old Substack?
Yeah. So wide left out football, we've got a couple of pieces up. So Luke Braun has written an almanac on the Vikings defense. Part one is about run defense in the front, and part two is about how the blitz and the coverage marry together to create kind of the most unique defense in the NFL, at least in my opinion. He's also got a piece breaking down Dallas Turner. A lot of people are like, "Hey, what happened to this first round pick that they traded a lot for?" Got some answers on that one. Generally a very good player, but he's not good at the one thing people ask him to do. So it's always kind of like, that kind of thing. I've got a piece about statistics and sustainability in close games and how that doesn't really apply to the Vikings in meaningful ways. Just a bunch of stuff over there. The most recent popular piece I've had has nothing to do with football. It's about neoliberalism. So we got all kinds of stuff over at Why Left Out Football. Film analysis, statistical breakdowns, game recaps, cultural commentary, political commentary. Check it out.
Yes, and all the millions of people listening and watching this show around the world should absolutely go and subscribe.
Hey, if only 1% of the million people who listen to the show subscribed, I haven't made it.
Good.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. All right, buddy. This is a lot of fun. We absolutely need to do this again in the future.
100%.
Thank you so much for coming on. And in terms of me, if you're watching this as a show on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to it as a podcast, be sure to leave a review. I read all of them, and it's Christmas, so be nice to me. My birthday's on Sunday, so don't say anything rude. Go read all the stuff. Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate that. If you are, where was I going with that? Oh, yes, go and read all the stuff at the Sporting News as well. A lot of stuff in terms of the MVP race from me going on over there. So go and read all of that. Arif, again, appreciate you, buddy. We'll do this soon.
All right, peace out, man.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back later on next week after Christmas. Back on the pump fake. Have a good one.